In this higher awe, we're not thinking about the world. We're thinking about God. All right. So we are in the middle of chapter 43, are looking at fear, awe of God. First, we discussed a lower dimension of awe, of fear, what we were elaborating on for chapter 41 and 42. But now we're ascending to something higher, a much deeper, more inner expression of God that's eliciting our awe. Because in the lower awe, we're looking at things we see, looking at the world. And looking at the world, we have an awe of God. Things happen in the world, and like you feel vulnerable. You feel there's a lot of power out there, and you're small, and you need protection and support, and you need God. That's could be the lower awe. But in the higher awe, we're not focusing on the world. We're actually focusing on God. And focusing on God, not the world, not the world's power, not the things that can make things hard and scary and difficult. None of that. Thinking about God evokes our real awe, our real nullification to him. We're about 9 lines from the bottom, 3 words from the end of the line. We're discussing this higher awe. As we said, this higher awe, this sense of like embarrassment. Because when I'm thinking about God, any transgression is embarrassing. It's embarrassing that I am doing something that harms him. That's embarrassing. That's painful. When I sin, the vitality that he's giving me gets captured, hijacked, hostage to evil. That's embarrassing because I'm making a choice that's giving him so much pain. I'm feeding his enemy. That's embarrassing. Again, so different from the lower awe, because in the lower one, there's things in the world that make me sense God's power. And that evokes the awe, like Niagara Falls, the Rocky Mountains. You feel God's power. And of course, it's not only nature, it's our life. A lot of things in our life make us feel God's power and our smallness. The world, that's the lower awe. In this higher awe, we're not thinking about the world. We're thinking about God. And when I'm thinking about God, and I'm sinning, I'm putting God under the domain of evil, that's embarrassing. I'm taking God and I'm having his energy feed the enemy, that the enemy gets more and more power because of my sins. That's embarrassing. I'm not thinking of power and vulnerability and getting hurt and getting in trouble and needing support. I'm thinking about God. And that's what's evoking this higher awe, this higher, very high, deep, pure relationship with him. So that's what the Rebbe said, that when we're in this space, we're thinking about what's going on the inside. We're not thinking about the world and the trappings and the majesty and the power and our vulnerability. And we're thinking about the God within the world. Really, as the Rebbe is going to develop this, there are 2 levels of nullification, 2 levels that evoke our awe on a deeper and deeper level. There's looking at the world and recognizing that within everything in the world is the God energy. And everything in the world is nullified to the God energy that's vivifying it. And that evokes in me an awe, a reverence, a sense of nullification, humility, negation of self, because everything in my world, there's a lot of stuff in our world. There's a lot of hard stuff, challenging stuff, important stuff. There's a lot of things, and there's a lot of things happening, and it's all God. It's all God. Think of whatever's on your mind now bothering you. Nothing what you're learning here. What was on your mind before you started thinking about Tanya 5 minutes ago? Whatever that thing is, a financial crunch, a legal matter, a health issue, a relationships issue, ticking inside everything is God energy. If it wasn't, that thing wouldn't be. I'm looking at all these issues and big things in my world, and I'm like, wait, ticking inside that is God energy. Ticking inside that is God energy. Ticking inside that is God energy. Inside everything is God energy. And everything in the world is truly nullified to the God energy that vivifies it, to the God energy inside it. So if I think about that, all the world, all the stuff that intimidates me, scares me, worries me, pressures me, it's all nullified to the God energy inside of it. That's its source. That's one level of deep awe of God. And then the Rebbe is going to explain, it goes a step further. Not only is everything in this world nullified to the God energy inside of it, but that God energy is nullified to God. That's God energy. It's not physical. It's God energy. It's the glow. It's godliness. It's the energy of God. But the energy of God is nullified absolutely to God himself, to the essence and being of God, which is really, so to speak, within that God energy. So it's like there's 3 layers here. If I'm looking at anything, here's a thing. Headphones. The headphones themselves, in the lower dimension of my awe of God, can evoke, perhaps, my sense of, wow, the power of this world and my nullification. Maybe headphones isn't a good example, but this happens to be what's right here. But in this higher perspective, I'm looking at the headphones and I'm like, there's God energy inside. That's how this exists. And this whole thing is totally nullified to that God energy. Everything is nullified to the God energy inside of it. Imagine that. Imagine the power of that God energy. And then that God energy is nullified to God, is nullified to the essence and being of God within that God energy. So here's these 2 levels of complete nullification. I could think about one, I could think about the other, I could think about both for the complete picture to really evoke a deep sense of my own nullification to God, as we will read. It says, if there's no chachma, there is no awe of God. And we explained on the simple level, chachma means wisdom. If you don't have the wisdom of Torah and her commandments, you can never ascend to this higher relationship with God. And then the Rebbe said, that's 100% true. We spent a long time last week explaining it. It's 100% true. But there's something deeper going on. Because chachma is a code word, or 2 Hebrew words embedded in the word chachma. Take it on faith. If you don't know the Hebrew, you could trust me on this one. But the chachma, those 4 letters, that's a 4-letter word, subdivides into 2 2-letter words. Koyach, ma. The power that we say on that, what was that? Now, if there's a power, there's a force, there's an energy, bang. Then I say, well, what was that? It means it's not something that I'm holding. It's not something I can talk about. It's not something I can delineate. It's not something I can measure. It's not something I can quantify. It's not something I can describe. Because this bang of, what was that? And why do I just have that question? Because this energy is so nullified, it's a bang that doesn't take up any space. It's a flash that I can't quantify and I can't describe and I can't measure and I can't delineate because it's nullification to God's energy. And that's what it is. So when we understand that, when we plug this concept of chachma, not wisdom in terms of intellect, but complete nullification to God, back into the saying of our sages and ethics of the fathers, im ein chachma, ein yira. If there is no chachma, if there's no absolute nullification to God, one can never get to the real deal yira, to this higher awe, negation, completely being subsumed in God's energies. Because for that, the gateway is your own nullification to God, your own chachma, your own flash that you can't grasp it, you can't hold it, it's gone because it's so nullified to God. So continuing this theme, chachma me'ayin timatze. So our sages say about chachma, again, chachma has these 2 dimensions. Chachma means wisdom. So you could look at that phrase very simply, chachma me'ayin timatze. Where do you find wisdom? That's a great question. But on this deeper Hasidic, Kabbalistic level, chachma me'ayin timatze means chachma, this complete nullification to God, the flash that you say, what was that? Because I can't hold it in my hands because it's so nullified. Me'ayin timatze. It's invested in God's power of ayin. Ayin means nothingness. But again, not nothingness because it doesn't exist. Nothingness because it's such a deep expression of God. It's this high level that we can't talk about at all. Like all of creation. We say all of creation is, this is a term we use, yesh me'ayin, which means something from nothing. Now we have something. We have a pair of headphones. Before there was nothing. There was only God. Well, that sounds like a little ridiculous. The headphones are reality and the God is nothing? So ayin really refers to a very high level of God. And again, you could go into a lot of explanations. Ayin, the numerical value, it reflects Keser, the crown, beyond the 10 Sefirot, the 10 divine attributes, but may ayin, from this dimension of ayin, from this nothingness, because it's too high for me to talk about it at all, from this dimension we'll roughly call in Keser, in the crown beyond the 10 Sefirot, the 10 divine attributes, that's where this level of Chachma is. May ayin timatzeh. You want to find Chachma? You want to find real nullification to God? You got to go all the way to the top. You got to go all the way to divine nothingness. That's where you can find it. Meaning, to really have this sense of complete nullification is not a level that is preceding our service of God. It's a very high dimension within our service of God. One can strive and work and grow to try to just get a little taste of this nothingness of complete nullification. What we call, in a lexicon of Hasidic thought, bitul b'mitzias. Bitul b'mitzias means a level of nullification that you are wiped out of your existence. Meaning, when we normally are nullified, we will call that technically bitul hayesh. Bitul hayesh means a nullification of self. Yesh, my sense of self, my ego, my I. So bitul hayesh we've all experienced in very many points in our life, I'm sure. You feel very strong and confident and very powerful, and then you're in the presence of someone who's more powerful. And their power negates yours. Like you're the manager of your department, but when the supervisor comes in or the big boss comes in, suddenly you're nullified. Bittul, a nullification of your yesh, of your sense of self, in the presence of a bigger yesh, a bigger self. So just as we can understand this in the human dynamics, of course it's true with us and God. We might, unfortunately, have a very strong sense of yesh. Yesh means existence. Yeshus, my sense of self, my sense of identity, my personal I. And my personal I could be very strong, as generally my I is very strong. Sometimes I can sense the power of God. And sensing God's power, my I is nullified. In the presence of God's power, especially if I'm in need, especially if there's situations going on that make me feel vulnerable, I sense there's a much bigger yesh, there's a much bigger power than mine, and that's God, and I'm nullified to him. We don't have to go into it, but obviously many of the stories that came out on October 7th were many people that unfortunately hadn't spent too much time of their life thinking about God, really had a tremendous arousal that for quite a number of them turned around their entire lives, because they really were feeling God's presence and power and protection and their nothingness in the face of that. And knowing their survival was just because of God, clinging to his power, and their own was nothing. That's a very dramatic situation, a very intense situation, that you really feel your nothingness in the presence of God. But we can have it every day of our life. There's plenty of things that happen every day that can make us really aware of our vulnerability, of our smallness, of our dependency, of God's power, of God's vastness, and my tininess. And that is called, Kabbalistically, in the language of Hasidic thought, bitul hayesh, the negation of that sense of self, the I. And as I'm saying, it's something we all access, no question. And then we're going to jump a million spiritual miles, and there's something called bitul b'mitzias. As we said, bitul means a nullification. B'mitzias means completely out of your existence. It's not like you're big. Well, I'm not really so big. It's like, well, I don't even really exist. I have no existence. Because what is my existence? God. So again, understanding what we're thinking about here, I'm looking at all the world around me. I could look at objects in the world. I could look at nature. I could look at political movements and wars. I could look at things humans are doing. Every one of us, whatever grabs our eyes, so to speak. There's lots in the world, and there are lots of things that have to do with people, like health issues, nature issues. And when I think into these things, and I think it's all nullified to the God energy inside of it. Doesn't exist. It's just a manifestation of that specific God energy. It's all nullified to that God energy. It has no reality besides that God energy. There's a bittul bim mitzias going on here. And then remember, and that God energy is nullified to God. So there's a real bittul bim mitzias here, because the item to the God energy and that God energy to God, there's nothing going on here at all. It's all God. And the more I think that as I look around the world, the more I can reflect inward and understand this is true about myself as well. And that could help bring me to this intense negation of self in the presence of God. Bittul b'mitzias. A negation that there's no existence. Because the all existence, the only existence, the absolute existence is God. That's it. And there's nothing else. Now, of course, I find this thought actually very reassuring. It's not a scary thought. It's not an intimidating thought. To me, it's a wonderfully comforting thought, because there's so many things in this world that could intimidate us, and that could seem powerful, and that could seem problematic and difficult and stress-evoking. Imagine looking at every one of those things in the eye and saying, you don't exist. You have no existence. Your only existence is the God energy inside of you, which also has really no existence, which is only existing as per the God. So this has a power to harm me? It's all God. And of course, we know this thought. And we have explored it from many different angles. This is another one. And each time, of course, as we rethink these ideas from all these different dimensions, it gets in a bit more, a bit more, a bit more. And what's the test? When we look at these things and we're calm, we're relaxed, we're confident. It's Adar, we're joyous. We're not fooled. It's God. Our sages say, who is the wise one? Now again, it means wise, but as we've decoded it, it means nullified. Who is the one that truly possesses chachma? Remember, chachma, koyach ma, that power that you say, what was that? So who really is a possessor of this nullification? Haroya es hanoilad, one who sees that which is born, which loosely the phrase means, Harayas Hanayla, that who sees the future. Again, seeing the future not meaning with prophetic sight, but meaning a wise person understands what happens in the future. If you eat the cookie tomorrow, you're going to feel bad about it. The tree is blooming now, it will eventually rot. If you invest your money here, you'll have it later. You spend it this way, when you need it, you won't have it. Who is the wise person? Who sees the future, who understands the outcomes from events in our world. That's on the very simplistic level, but also, of course, very true what this saying means. But now when we're decoding it very deeply, who is the person that has this chachma, this real nullification, who sees how something comes into existence, literally again, Haroya es hanoilad, which loosely means who sees what will be, sees the future, understands the outcome, literally means who sees how the thing is born, who sees, who perceives, it's sight, it's tangible, how everything exists, how it's born, how it's alive, how it's existing. Because if you really have this chachma, this nullification to God, you're seeing that everything is born as God matter and exists as God matter and will only be God matter. And when you're in that space, the only thing that's real is God. And when the only thing that is real is God, what are you? What's your reality? And that's a beautiful space to be. It's a reassuring space to be in. It's the most secure space to be in. What's the world? And what am I? God matter. That's what everything is. That's what the Chacham, that's what the person who possesses this nullification sees tangibly, like sight. It's all God, and that means me as well. Perush, meaning to say, Sheroya kol davar, that he sees in everything. Eich noilad, how it's born, vinishave, and exists. Me'ayin liyesh, from nothingness, God matter, to something of substance, physical world matter, bidvar havaya, from the speech of God. That's the God matter causing all to exist. V'ruach piv yisbarech, the breath of the mouth of God, meaning God, 5,784 years ago and change, said 10 sentences. They're the first chapter of Genesis, starting with the first verse. Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'aretz haaretz. From the first of all, God created heaven and earth, and 9 other verses throughout chapter 1. And he's been saying those 10 sentences, statements, ever since. And from the words of those 10 statements, all exists. That's their energy matter. That's what they are. Godly letters of light, godly letters of energy. That's what everything is. Varying combinations of the words of God. There's someone who I actually once heard him speak personally. He gives a lot of lectures. His name is Alon Naava. He's an Israeli who was at this time completely irreligious, living in New York, the wild, crazy life. And he had a near-death experience. And he literally, of course, almost died. You know, like you've heard probably from many people in these experiences, he looks down, he's out of his body, he sees that small, pathetic looking body there. In his case, it was in the car, in the taxi, and whatever. And then as he describes it, and this is a person who knew nothing. He hadn't read some holy book that inspired it. He knew nothing. But he's describing as he's in his out-of-body experience, everywhere he looks, he sees letters. Now, he's Israeli, so he knows the Hebrew alphabet. So he's seeing in everything Hebrew letters. Everywhere he looked, it was all letters. It was all the alphabet. It was all the Hebrew letters, these shining lights of letters. And when he was saying this, now, he did get back in, obviously, and he did, not the day after, but ultimately did return to God, and he's a big lecturer in Israel now, and maybe in America as well. But when he was saying this, and I was in the audience listening to him, and I was like, of course. He saw the letters, because that is the fabric of all. It's all letters. As the Alter Rebbe is saying, the Chacham, the person who possesses Chachma, who's nullified to God, that he gets it, that he sees it. It's all godly letters. Now, when I say he sees it, it doesn't mean like Alon Naava, that he literally sees the letters, but he's, so to speak, perceiving it. With his mind's eye, everything he looks at is God letters, God letters, God letters. From the 10 statements, it's all God. And God keeps saying it, and these words keep existing, and thus continues the world. If God wanted the world to stop, he just needs to pause, and nothing would be. It's all existing because he's every second re-saying the 10 statements of power of all of creation, and it's all Word of God. So imagine if you looked at your life. The way I'm processing at this moment is if I looked at my struggles and challenges and things that could stress me if I allowed them to, and say, it's all God letters. It's all God. It doesn't exist. It literally is nullified within the God energy. And that God energy is nullified to God. There's nothing else. What a tranquil space. What a calm space. What a safe space. What a joyous space. It's all God. And this evokes, and me too. What am I? And that's why this is the upper awe. Because it's not like you're looking at the scary things in the world or the powers of the world and being nullified and intimidated by them. It's the opposite. You're looking at these things and you're not intimidated at all because you see what's inside. And what's inside is God. And you're in that space of connecting to the God within. And just as in the world, it's all nothing to the God within, so too by me. And that evokes this very, very, very all-encompassing nullification and awe of God. Kimosha Kasuv, how can we say it's all God letters? Uberuch piv kol tzva'am. That's what the verse says. And with the breath of the mouth of God is all the hosts. Everything comes into existence. Ve'ilizos, and if so, harei hashamayim v'ha'aretz v'chol tzva'am, heaven, earth, and everything in them, b'teilin b'mitzias mamish. They are literally, remember this is that term I explained before, batel b'mitzias. They are literally nullified out of their existence. They have no existence. And the Rebbe adds the word, like for emphasis, for reality check, mamish. Mamish means literally, tangibly, actually. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't exaggeration. Literally, everything is nothing to the God energy inside of it, which in turn is nothing to God. Bidvar Havaya, to the speech of God, the word of God, Beruach Piv, to the breath of the mouth of God. Ukolo Mamish Chashivi, it's all considered as nothing. Ve'ayin ve'efes mamish. It's literally nothing. And now we're going to give a metaphor in case this isn't clear enough. Now, this metaphor that the Rebbe is going to give, the Rebbe gives a number of times in Tanya, dissects at length in another section of Tanya called Shar Hayich Ve'emuna, this very specific metaphor. Of course, we're not going to go through the intensity of the dissection that occurs in this other section of Tanya, Shar Hayich Ve'emuna, but just we'll explain it basically. What is the metaphor, the parable? Kibitol or v'ziv hashemesh, like the nullification of the light, of the rays of the sun, beguf hashemesh atzma, within planet sun herself. Meaning, and as I'm saying, this is a classic metaphor of Tanya. The Alter Rebbe gives it a number of times. We've learned it before. We will learn it again. And I said, this section that we're learning of Tanya is the first section, really called Likutei Amarim, 53 chapters. The next section is Shar Hayich Ve'emuna, to understand the unity of God, belief in the unity of God, the oneness of God, which is 12 chapters. And in those 12 chapters, we really dissect this metaphor. But what are we saying here? What's the metaphor? The metaphor is we have a planet, a star, a planet. It's called the sun. Now, the sun in our solar system is the most powerful star there is. We are about 90 million miles from the sun. And our whole world exists because of our proximity. How close? 90 million miles to the sun. And of course, everything is very, very precise, because if we were any closer than 90 million miles, there'd be no life. The sun's energy would be too intense and nothing could exist, as are all the planets closer to the sun. And if we were further than 90 million miles, there'd also be no life, because we're too far from the sun, as are all the planets further from the sun than us. So God made planet Earth perfect, 90 million miles away. So 90 million miles from the sun, how am I benefiting from the sun? Well, there's the rays. There's the energy that's emitted by the sun. And that energy, 90 million miles away, allows our world to exist. We have heat, we have warmth, we have light, we have energy, all of these things that are absolutely necessary for life. And again, if we were any closer, like all the planets closer, too close, get burnt up. Any further, too far, freeze. No light, no warmth, no. We're exactly juxtaposed to receive all the benefits of the sun without any of the downsides. But again, we're not getting the sun. The sun is 90 million miles away. So what's giving us light? What's giving us warmth, heat, energy, allowing life to flourish, things to grow, people to exist? What's that? It's not the sun. She's 90 million miles from here. It's the rays. Oh, wow, those rays are powerful. They are powerful. They're powerful enough to allow planet Earth to exist. Now, obviously, we understand that the closer you get to the sun, the more powerful those rays are, which is why all the planets closer than us to the sun can't exist any form of life, because they're too powerful, the rays. So here, let's pretend we're following those rays. Now we're getting closer. Now we're 80 million miles. Whoa, they're a lot more intense. Now we're 70 million miles. Now we're 50 million miles. Now we're 20 million miles. Now we're 10 million miles. Now we're getting closer and closer, and the rays are getting, whoa, so hot, so intense, such light, such heat, such energy. Oh my gosh. Now, obviously nothing could exist here. It's like you totally, melt out of existence, burn up out of existence. But pretend. We're getting closer and closer and closer, and the rays are just more and more intense. And then when we get close enough that there's the sun herself, the rays are gone. There's no rays. What happened to the rays? What are the rays in the presence of the sun? The rays are the energy emitted by the sun. So when you're far from the sun, you don't have to be 90 million miles away, but when you're far from the sun, what you perceive, what you are benefiting from, what's giving you light and warmth and energy, it's the rays. And the closer to the sun, the more powerful the rays. But if you actually get to the sun herself, you don't see any of the rays, because the rays themselves are completely nullified in the presence of their source, the sun. And that is the metaphor that the Alter Rebbe uses many times in Tanya to express the concept of nothing have any existence besides God. And how we're using it here, again, could be on both levels that we were describing before. The world seeming to have a lot of existence. Remember my headphones? But what are they in truth? It's like that's the rays. But when they're in the presence of the God energy, when the rays are by the sun, and the God energy is always inside those headphones, they don't have any existence. They're completely nullified. So what are those headphones? How do I even see them when the reality, the sun is within them, and when you're by the sun, the rays have no existence? And then, of course, going even deeper into this concept, the power of the rays that's perceived when they're away from the sun is like the God energy. When I don't have the God, when God, when his essence and his being is somewhere out there, and then the rays, the energy, God's words, God's speech, God's light, God's letters, wow, that has the power that's creating everything in our world. But what's all that power when the rays are by the sun? When God energy is by God. But God energy is always by God. In the metaphor, in the power role, we have the rays that are literally physically away from the sun, and then we trace them back to literally physically being by the sun. But the God energy is always within the creation that it's vivifying. The rays are always by the sun. And the God energy always has within it God. The rays are always by the sun. So when you understand this, it's almost like it flips the question from, can I really see the whole world as God, to how do I see the world when all there is God? How, if you really get the metaphor and you really understand that the rays are always by the sun because the God energy is within everything it vivifies, and God is within that God energy. He's not there and the God energy is here. The God energy is not here and creation is there. God energy is within the creation and God is within the God energy. So how do I see world? How do I possibly see world when the rays are by the sun? When it's so nullified out of its existence? That's the question. Now, we could be very philosophical here, though, as I said, I think it's very practical because I think it's such a reassuring thought, such a comforting thought. When the world seems so crazy, the rays are by the sun. It's all God energy. It's all God. But this could seem very philosophical. This might seem very deep. But the Rebbe says, this is meant to be practical. Because you too. Don't take yourself out of the picture. Also you. What's you? What are you? A body? An animal soul? A piece of God? You. All nullified to the God energy. And all that God energy nullified to God. Same way I'm looking at the rest of the world is true for me too. And that thought evokes this absolute nullification. Such a degree of nullification that you could lose your existence entirely. The rays are within the sun. Shagam gufo, also your body. V'nafsho v'rucho v'nishmaso, your soul, your animal soul, all levels of your godly soul. Betelin b'metzias b'dvar havaya, are completely nullified to the word of God, to that God energy, to those godly letters within which is God himself. V'dibur yisparach miyucha b'achshavto chule. Kanal, perek chaf of chaf alf. And the speech of God, that God energy, is totally fused with the thought of God, and the thought of God, etc., is completely one with him. As we discussed at length, we have learned these ideas before, though now we're going a little more deeply into them. Chapters 20 and 21. But arichos, as we discussed there at length. So am I the only one that can look at this and really see the comfort and the compassion in these words? That it's really a sense of like, breathe. It's all good. It is literally, literally, literally all God. When I learn these thoughts, that's what I feel. That it's all God. There's a lot in the world that could scare me, but hey, can't get scared. It's all God. It's no power. It's all God. Nothing but. No conflict. No competition. It's all God.